Welcome to The Hill. We hope you enjoy this week's message.
So Hannah spoke a couple of weeks ago. I just started a new series, and that's called The Cloud. And it's based on Hebrews 11, where it's looking at the list of great examples of faith. And so Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, "Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in the day of old earned a good reputation." So throughout Hebrews 1, it gives a long list of different people. And I'm not going to give a big introduction to it. Hannah did a great introduction when she started the series. So if you haven't heard that, then I do kind of advise you to go back and have a listen. But basically, I'm not going to look at those people in the Bible either, but we're going to look at different people who have kind of been around in these days as well, a bit closer to us. So last time Hannah spoke on David Wilkerson, and he was like the founder of Teen Challenge. But today, I've decided I'm going to speak on a woman she was referred to as a little woman, because I think she was about 4'10", something like that. And her name is Gladys Aylward. But before I start to talk about her, I just want to say I'm not going to be able to tell you everything about her. There's so much. When I was reading, I'm not a massive reader, but I read the book, and there's just so many things in there which I wanted to share, and I thought, oh, that's so cool, that's amazing. But I've had to there's still quite a lot I'm going to share with you today, but I've had to cut it down. So I'm not going to be able to tell you it all, and I'm going to stop at a certain point as well. I'm not going to continue with the rest of it. But, so who is Gladys? I should have a picture of her coming up. This is Gladys Aylward. She was born on 24th of February 1902. She was brought up in London in a borough called Edmonton. She has two siblings. She has one brother called Lawrence, one sister Violet. She was brought up in a working class family, and they were brought up going to church. And I think back in that time, it was kind of the thing that everyone would do. Many people went to church. It wasn't out of the norm, really. She left school at the age of 14. She had no education. I think when I was reading, it kind of said that if you were to look at her education now, she probably would have been classed as being dyslexic back then, and she didn't obviously get the support that she would have needed. So when she left school at the age of 19, she started working as a parlour maid. And later, when she got a bit older, she moved away from her hometown to work as a parlour maid just to try and get a bit more money. And when she moved away, she kind of stopped going to church. A couple of her interests were acting, and she liked to go out dancing. And when I say dancing, I mean in these days, it'd be like going down Wine Street, having a little boogie, and doing whatever down there. So it was actually, it wasn't a good thing then that she'd stopped going to church. She started doing other things, really. She kind of drifted away from God. But one evening, when she was out with her friends, she somehow found herself sitting in a church service. So I think she must have got split up from them somehow and carried into a crowd, and found herself sitting in a church service. And the talk that was being shared that evening was on mission, and she'd heard loads of stories or loads of talks about mission previously, but this one really kind of stuck with her. And even though Gladys wasn't supposed to be in church that evening, she was supposed to be out going dancing with the girls, she wasn't the kind of person who would get up and go. So she's like, oh, well, I'm here now, I'll just stay, kind of thing. And from then on, she kind of continued going to the church, and she kind of got stuck in with that church and started kind of building that relationship with God again. And one day, when she was just on the bus, she saw this magazine, this Christian magazine, and there was an article on there. This isn't the actual article, I did this. It said, planes can now fly over the vast country China, but there are millions who have never heard the gospel. And this really stuck with Gladys, and she couldn't quite believe that there were millions of people that were living and dying and didn't have the opportunity to hear about God. And she couldn't get rid of this image of this article and of people who are not actually getting this opportunity that she kind of took for granted when she was a child. So she was like, oh, I've got to do something about this, haven't I? So she started going to high up people in the church or high up people who she knew. And she's like, look, you need to go to China. You need to, get out there and tell them about God. They're missing out on this. And everyone she kind of approached, they were like, no, I'm doing something else or whatever. And then it came to the point where she was like, I think she was at home and she had a bit of a family dinner. And she said to her brother, look, I think you should go to China and you should go and tell them all about God. And his response to her was, me, go to China as a missionary? He's like, that's a job for an old parlour maid. If you're so keen, then why don't you go? And then she was a bit like, and thought of that, and she started going through all these excuses in her head, I'm too young. What could I do? I'm a woman. I've got bad health. I haven't got any education. And she was thinking, oh, really? I can't go to China. What am I going to do? And then it didn't kind of go away. And this heart for China just stuck with her. And she thought, right, okay, God's put it on my heart. I need to go to China. I need to do something about this. Because she couldn't stop thinking about all these people that were missing out on hearing about God. So she did some research into China and looked at kind of where it was, and looked a bit about the history and the culture of the Chinese people. And she thought, right, let's do it. I'm going to apply for, there was a China Inland Missionary School. She's like, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to get all my education I need there, and they're going to send me off, and I'm going to do God's work. So she went for an interview, and that didn't go so well. So her education, like I said at the beginning, wasn't very good. She left school with no education. Her passion for what she wanted to do was great, and the mission school could see that. But her education and her understanding, her learning ability wasn't so good. So the missionary school said, look, we'll give you a term, we'll see how that goes, and then we'll see where we go from there. So she did the first term. She was brilliant at telling people about God, but learning the language, she just couldn't grasp it, and getting the assignments done, she kept on forgetting to do all them. So after one term, they basically turned around to her and said, look, I'm sorry, but you're not qualified to go. You can't grasp this language, and if you go to China, you need to be able to speak to the people out there. What good are you going to be if you can't speak to them? And they said, actually, I think you're a bit too old to get this language now. You're not going to get it. It's quite hard. So she got kicked out after the first term. So that's not a very good start, is it, really? So she, that kind of made her question a bit then. She was like, well, does God really want me to go to China? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or am I just running after something that's something that I'm making up? So she prayed about it, and one evening she'd put a Bible on her bedside, she put her money there, and she said, God, if you want me to go, use me. And within a day or so, she had a job offer. And this was to continue to do parlour-maid work, but it was quite well paid. So she was like, okay, you're going to provide the money, let's do this. So she went to a travel agent, and sorry, I got a bit of a tickle. And she said, right, I want to go to China. How can I get to China? And the guy was like, well, there's two ways you can go. You can go by boat, and that's £90. Or you can go by train, and that's £47. So I did a little Google search to figure out how much that money was worth. And I don't know if it's 100% right, but so £47 was about £3,046. £90 is about £5,833. So she's like, right, that's a lot of money, but I'll go for the cheaper option, and let's do it. I'm gonna go by train. And this travel agent was like, oh, well, the thing is, actually, there's a civil war going on between China and Russia, and they're fighting over control over the railway line. Sorry. And the guy was like, well, we like to get our people there alive. So it's not the best option. She was adamant. She was like, I'm going. She said, I'm going to come back every week, and I got to pay you money every week. So to think about having to save £3,046, how long would that take me today? That'd take me a fair good while, It's not a little bit of money, it's quite a lot of money. So she did it. She kept on coming back every week and putting her deposit down. Sorry. And it didn't take her years. In fact, it only took her a few months. And she actually paid off her train ticket, which is amazing. And without God and without his provision, she wouldn't be able to do that. That's a lot of money to be able to save up. So she thought, right, I paid it off. Great, let's go. But before she went, she'd spoken to someone who's got a few links out in China. And there was a woman out there who's already doing the mission work out there, and her name was Janine Lawson. She was an elderly woman. She was in very bad health. She'd been in China for many, many years, and she'd been doing God's work out there. So she was going out there to meet her. So Gladys was very excited, but she still had a long way to go. She had to actually get to China. So I got a map coming up just to show. So from London all the way to Yangcheng. My Chinese pronunciation isn't very good, so you'll have to bear with me. But that's about, 5,000 miles. So that's a long way, and that's a straight way, okay? Gladys obviously wouldn't have been able to go straight over. She didn't fly by plane, because that was still a new thing, but she couldn't afford that either. So she had to get trains here, there, and everywhere. And it actually took her about a month or so to finally get there. But there was a lot of kind of disruptions and obstacles on the way. Once she had left Britain, there wasn't very many people that could speak English. And she couldn't pick up the Chinese language at all by then. She had a little bit of food with her. She didn't have much money because all of her money had gone on the tickets. And this civil war, she actually got to this civil war. And the trains were like, right, you have to get off now. We're not going any further because there's a war going on. And she could hear all these gunshots and everything happening. So after many, many obstacles of changing her route, not being able to speak and communicate with people, not having anywhere to sleep at night when she's changing her direction, she finally got there. And when she got there, she met Janine. And it says in the book, obviously don't know how 100% accurate it is, but it says in the book, Janine was like, who are you? What are you doing? She's like, I've just travelled for a month to get here. It's taken me ages. There's been loads of different obstacles in my way. She's like, oh, I'm Gladys, I said I was coming. And she's like, right, get your bags, come on, let's go. She's like, oh, flipping heck, I thought, I don't want to party or anything, but, it would be nice to just have a nice welcome. So they didn't kind of start off on the best terms. And actually it says that their personalities clashed quite a lot. They were both very outspoken women, very strong personalities. She still couldn't speak the language, and actually the local people where they were in Yangcheng didn't like foreigners. So these two women were the only two white women in this place, and they used to call them the foreign devils. And if they were out about, doing their shopping or whatever, people would be throwing stones at them, they'd be chasing them out. And Gladys was like, how are we supposed to do God's work here? Am I in the right place? God, am I doing what you want me to do? So the work in China, there's lots of different things they did in China. And actually one of the ways that they started speaking to people was they bought this inn for... So the working men would come on their donkeys and they'd stop for the night in Yangcheng, and then they'd carry on with their work and their journeys. So their plan was, right, get them in, we'll feed them, we'll give them a nice place to sleep for the night, and we'll tell them stories about God. And the people in this area They loved stories. So they knew if they were going to tell them a good story about God and about the Bible, then they would tell those stories on. So they were doing their work for them as well. So they did that, and it was really hard at first because nobody wanted to stay with these foreign devils. They wanted to be with the other Chinese people. But it started happening, and people started going there because they loved the stories. And later on, it didn't take a while, and Janine did pass away and she died, so it left Gladys on her own. She was starting to pick up the language at this point, but still wasn't fluent. So she was thinking, how am I going to tell these people about God if I can't communicate with them? And how am I going to keep this in running if I haven't got the money or the funds to do it and I'm on my own? And then it was around this point then, there was this Mandarin. So the Mandarin is a high-up official in that area. And he approached her, and around this time the law had come in where it was illegal to bind women's feet. So in China they used to do this practice where only on the girls they would bind their feet so they wouldn't grow, and it was a sign of beauty, and it was like a status as well. So if you had your feet bound, then you were more beautiful. But actually it put these girls in absolute agony, because if their feet were a little bit big, then they would crush them so it went under, and then they would wrap them up. Or if they were very young, they'd wrap them so they couldn't grow anymore. So the law was coming in, well, that was illegal. And lots of places had stopped doing that, but there were other little kind of areas, like in the mountain areas, that weren't abiding by that. And they were like, this is what we do. We're not going to stop doing that. So the Mandarin approached Gladys and said, you need to be the foot inspector, and you need to go around and tell these people that they can't do it anymore. Gladys was like, what? I didn't come here to be a foot inspector. I've come here to tell everybody about God and how amazing he is. So she kind of bargained with him, and she said, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, then first of all, you need to pay me, because she needs to keep the inn running while she's going. And second of all, I want to be able to tell people about God. The Mandarin was like, yeah, fine, go for it, I'm happy with that. It's perfect. And actually, by doing that job, she was given soldiers to go around with her to kind of make sure that the law was enforced. And she managed to pick up 5 of the different native languages in the area by doing that work. So she managed to tell people about God, she picked up the language, and she started to build up a lot of trust with the local people. So if you look back, she's come from being a foreign devil, nobody wanted her at all, to being someone who was actually doing some quite high up work and was starting to get respect. I just think there, God's provision is amazing, isn't it? God put these plans in place for her to be able to share this work. While she was doing this work, Gladys, like I said before, she wasn't someone who would just be quite quiet and go along with whatever you said. She was outspoken. She wanted to tell people about God. She'd tell you about God, and she'd tell you about his work. And she often would have conversations with this Mandarin and challenge him on his faith. And one day, while she was with him, this guy had come from the prison. There was like a prison in the area. And he said, look, the prison's out of control. People are killing each other. You need to do something about it. So the Mandarin was like, well, send the guard in to sort it out. He's like, I'm not going in there. It's too dangerous. They've got axes. They're killing each other. I'm not going in there. And so the Mandarin turned around to Gladys and was like, well, you'll have to go. Gladys is like, what? I'm this little woman. I'm British. Why are these people going to listen to me? I can't go there. And he's like, oh, well, you go on about how much your God will protect you, so he'll protect you in there. You'll be fine. And at this point, she's like, why do I go on so much? Why don't I keep my mouth shut? But she thought, okay, God is with me, and I believe that he's going to keep me safe. So she went to this prison, and you can just imagine it, can't you? That there's this little woman, and the big guards, have kind of opened the door, pushed her in, and shut it behind her. And so she slowly kind of walked in, and is this falling? Are we okay? So, And she said there was just riots in there, and there was people running around. There was a man running around with an axe. There was bodies on the floor. And this guy with an axe was running towards her, and she just said, "Give me the axe." And you think, oh, he's not going to give her the axe, is he? He's probably going to give her a whack with the axe, if anything. But everyone was just stunned by this little woman going in there, and she said, "Give me the axe." And slowly this man gave her the axe. And she didn't just take the axe and go. She spoke with the people, and she said, "Look, what is happening? Why have we got so many riots in here? What's happening?" And they basically turned around and said, "Look, a lot of us are in here for life. We've got nothing to do. We are bored. We don't have enough food. So we're just kind of going out of our minds." So she spoke with the people, and she got order in that prison and left and went back to the mandarin and said, "Look, you need to make change, because if you don't make change, they're going to keep on killing each other. And I've told them that I'm going to help them, so you need to do it." And it happened. This woman's come along and she's making all this change, but without God, she wouldn't have been able to get anywhere. Again, God's provision is awesome, isn't it? Then while she's kind of still doing all of her foot inspector work, there was one day this woman came up to her, and she had a bag, and she said, "Oh, give me $2 and you can have this." Gladys was like, "Oh, I don't have $2, She was like, "Well, what is it?" And looked in, there was a little baby girl in there. She was like, "Oh, look, I've got 9 pence on me." So the woman was like, "Fine, I'll have that." Took the 9 pence, gave her the baby, and went. Gladys was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this, And this was kind of the start for Gladys, where people started entrusting her with children. She'd built up this reputation already, and people started entrusting her with children. And this girl that she was given, she actually named her 9 pence, which is quite original. And there's a few other, which I won't go into telling you their stories as well, but little by little, these children started coming and living with Gladys. And around about that time, there's a Japanese invasion, and they just want to take over the mountain area of China. And lots of people fled from that area because they didn't want to get captured by the Japanese. But Gladys was like, "No, this is where God has brought me. I'm staying here." There was lots of bombs and air raids as well, and lots of people died. And this meant that there were some orphan children as well. Again, Gladys kept on taking them in. And it built up. So Gladys had about 200 children living with her in this inn. And it started to get even more dangerous now. So the Japanese were starting to come closer to their area. So they were like, "We've got to move these children. We can't keep them here." So there was this one guy, he took 100 of the children while it was still quite safe. And he got them. The plan was, we're going to get them to there's this Yellow River. When you get over the Yellow River, there's a few orphanages there that will help us out, and they'll kind of take on these children and look after them for us. So great. So he did that. The plan was he was going to come back and take the other 100 children and get them to safety, because Gladys was determined she's not going. This is where God wants me to be. I'm not moving from here. So they were waiting and waiting, and this guy wasn't coming back. But what Gladys didn't know was after he had dropped those children off, he was captured and he was killed. Because the Japanese were getting closer and closer now, and it was just getting too dangerous. And it got to the point where they were in Yangcheng, and Gladys had to take these 100 children on her own, the ones that were left. And with this, there was the majority of them were between the ages of 4 and 8 years old, and there was a couple of kids that were probably about 14, 15 there as well, just to help her along. And during this time, she actually got shot by the Japanese. So she was like, "Right, okay, we need to go. They're here now. We need to get these kids out and get them safe." So they're like, "Right, we're going to make it to the Yellow River." And it took them a good few weeks to get to the Yellow River. Imagine this, right? You've got 100 4 to 8 year olds. You have hardly any food, hardly any money. Where are you going to keep them? How are you going to keep them safe? Where are you going to live? Where are you going to sleep when you're on your way there? But they just kind of had to make deal, and they had to try and get to this Yellow River. So her plan was, we'll get to the Yellow River, we'll get over, and they'll be safe. Perfect. So they got, after a long journey, they got to the Yellow River, and there was nobody there. It was abandoned, because everyone's worried, and the Japanese coming in, they're all worried. So Gladys is like, oh no, what are we going to do? And one of the little girls, so this river, is about, I think it's about 2,600 miles long, and it's a mile wide. And it's known as, it was a very dangerous river. Lots of people have died crossing that river. So she was like, oh, there should be boats here, God, where are you? You're supposed to have these boats ready for me to get these kids over, and we're all going to be safe. And she just burst out crying because she was exhausted. She already had these wounds where she'd been shot by the Japanese. She wasn't in good health as it was. She'd give up her food for the children to have it. She carried most of the children, a lot of the children, the majority of the way, because they were just little. So she was exhausted. And then this little girl comes up to her and goes, oh, remember that story you told us about Moses and the Red Sea? And Gladys is like, yeah, I do, knowing what's going to come. And she's thinking, that was a different time, And the little girl's like, yeah, but, we still have the same God. So she's like, yeah, you're right, actually. She's like, right, everybody get on your knees. We're going to pray, and we're going to ask God to be here and God to help us. So they did. They got down on their knees, and they started praying. And they were crying. They were just pleading with God, God, help us. And then in the distance, they saw these soldiers coming. And first of all, they thought that they were the Japanese soldiers coming to get them. But it turned out that they were the Chinese army that were coming to help. And the Chinese guy, one of the army officials, he was like, right, what are you doing here? He's like, you need to go back. You can't stay here. The Japanese are on their way. And Gladys like, you must be having a laugh. I'm not going back. I've just traveled for weeks with these 100 children. The Japanese are on their way. I'm not going to get back. You need to get us across this river. So I think the soldier was a bit like, oh, well, okay. And then he blew this whistle, and suddenly these boats appeared. And they were all the kids and Gladys, they were just praising God and just so thankful. And again, how amazing is that? They're there praying. There's no boats. There's nothing around. Suddenly these soldiers come and they provide them with these boats to get across the river. So they got across the river and they got to Sian, I think it is. Oh, yeah, Sian after that. And, no, they got over the river. Sorry, getting mixed up. And once they were over the river, it was abandoned. There was nobody there. Again, she's like, oh my gosh, I've come so far. What is happening, God? So she's like, okay, we'll go to the next place, Sian. So she's like, right, it took them a few more days, get to Sian. They got there. Sian was closed. They weren't letting anybody else in. They'd taken on too many refugees. They had no more capacity for anyone to be there. Gladys is like, right, okay, God, I'll go on. And there was another place where she was planning to go anyway, called Fu Feng, which took them another week or so to get there. And when she finally got there, they were open. They let them in, and they took the children away from her. So I do have a map, actually, just to show the distance. So they were over here in Yangcheng. They went to the Yellow River, crossed the Yellow River, went to Sian, and then went to Fu Feng. And that says up there that would have taken 12 days and 10 hours to do. That's probably in a car. So if you imagine that distance with 100 children, with the Japanese chasing you, with no food, no money, most of the children are about 4 to 8 years old, you're carrying them, you're wounded already, time after time, there's obstacles in your way, where you're getting so far, and then it's being pushed away again. You're getting so far, and you're being kind of blocked again. But that's a long distance, isn't it? But she finally made it there. And once she'd handed over responsibility for the children, she collapsed. She was very ill, and her health really deteriorated at that point. And I'm going to stop the story at that point. Lots more happened after that, but you can read on that in your own time. So why did I choose to talk about Gladys? Well, we see through her story just God's awesome provision, don't we? I mean, time after time, there was obstacles in their way, and she could have given up at the first hurdle when she wasn't accepted into that college, and they were told her, actually, no, you're not qualified enough, so you know, I'm sorry. And she could have been like, okay, God, I tried, and left it at that point, but she didn't. Without God, she wouldn't have been able to get to China, let alone do all the things that she did in China. She trusted fully on God and didn't let anything get in her way. She was told that she's not qualified to go. She'd never be able to learn the language. But she did. She learned 5 of the native languages in that area. And we heard a couple of weeks ago when Dave was talking that God doesn't call the qualified, but he qualifies the called. And that is shown in Gladys' story, isn't it? The amount of times she got knocked back, but she wouldn't let that stop her. So as I was going through the story, I thought, this is a big challenge, and this is exciting hearing her story and God's provision in her life. So I was thinking, for us as a church, and for me as well, do we fully trust in God and believe that he will provide? Are we limiting God's ability and provision in our lives? Are we asking God to show his plan for us? Are we like Gladys was and hearing God's call in our lives but trying to get other people to do it instead? Luke 11 verse 9 says, "And so I tell you, keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you." I mean, when we're close to God, the devil doesn't like that, does he? And he tries to intervene, and he tries to stop that. And again, in Gladys' story, we see that time and time after again. And it's just a perfect example of all the obstacles that got in her way. And the closer she was getting to God, and the more determined she was to get to China and do God's work there, more and more obstacles came in her way. In 1 Peter 5, verse 6 to 10, says this: "So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time he will lift you up in honor. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. Stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. Remember that your family of believers all over the world are going through the same kind of suffering you are. In his kindness, God called you to share in his eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus. So after you have suffered a little while, he will restore you, support you and strengthen you, and he will place you on a firm foundation." And I think from sharing Gladys' story today, and kind of asking God what he wants me to share today and what it is that he wants me to kind of get across to myself and across to the church. And I think the thing that came from this was that God's provision is awesome, but we just have to trust in him.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Hill Church, please visit our website, the-hill.co, or come and see us on Sunday at 4 p.m. in Matthew's house.